Hey guys, how are y'all doing? Been missing Awana since, well, our new way of living here. Hope everyone is doing well. And again, can't wait to get back to Awanas on Wednesday nights and start having fun and teaching you guys about the Bible in our normal environment. I know this is strange, it's weird, it's different. It's extremely different for me sitting here and not really being able to interact with you guys the way that I'm used to. I do have Adriana here, so at least I've got somebody here to kind of interact with while I'm doing this. But today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a very important person in the Bible that not many people really know that much about, and she's really not talked about very much. You don't hear a lot about her in church. You don't hear a lot about her mentioned even in Sunday school lessons or Bible lessons in general. And as we sit here tonight doing the Awana lesson, we're going to talk about Miriam. Miriam was a very important person in the Bible. And yes, Miriam is a woman. I know it seems like all of our other lessons have been about men in the Bible, and even Miss Kim last week taught you guys about Aaron, Moses' brother. And this week as we talk about Miriam, Miriam is just as important as Aaron was in the freeing of Israel from the bondage of Egypt. And as we sit here and we look at Miriam this week, I do want to bring up some important things from last week as Kim talked about Aaron being a servant and how critical Aaron was and how helpful Aaron was with Moses in getting the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And just as important as Aaron and Moses were, Miriam was also. And as we sit here and we look at Miriam, number one, Miriam was the older sister of Moses and Aaron. She was the oldest child in their family. And so as we look at Miriam, she was a leader in her family from day one. The Bible actually calls her a prophetess, that she was the first prophetess mentioned in the Bible, to the point where there's actual stories told that she prophesied that her brother Moses being born was going to be the man coming forth that God would use to free Israel from the bondage of Egypt. Now that's not recorded in the Bible that I can find, but that's one of the tales going around about Miriam, that she actually did prophesy that. The Bible does call her a prophetess that God used in mighty ways. And Miriam is first mentioned in the Bible in Exodus chapter number 2, and she's not even mentioned by name. She's actually talked about as the babe's sister, and that's when Moses' mother was pregnant with him, and she gave birth to Moses, that there was a decree that went out because the Pharaoh had heard that God was going to send someone to free Israel from Egypt, and so he had ordered all the man children to be killed at birth. And so Miriam was sitting here, and the Bible says that whenever Moses was placed in the bulrush on the Nile River, that Miriam was standing on the bank watching what was going to happen to the baby. She was actually there watching what was going to take place and how far down the river he was going to float and where he was going to end up. And she was almost like a lookout, an overseer, someone watching over Moses even before Moses knew it. So here we have Miriam. The Bible says in Exodus chapter 2 that she was standing on the banks of the river whenever the Pharaoh's daughter seen Moses in the bulrush hung up there in the little oak or the little ark that his mother had created for him to try to rescue him. And so as we're sitting here and we're looking at the story, and Miriam is on the banks of the river, and she sees what happens, and Pharaoh's daughter comes down and rescues Moses from the bulrush, and Miriam is so quick to react. She runs over to the Pharaoh's daughter and she says, well, here you have this baby, but maybe we need to get one of the Hebrew women to come and nurse the child because the child is still of nursing age. And Pharaoh's daughter says, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you go get someone? And who does Miriam go get? Miriam runs and gets their own mother to raise Moses. So God had a plan for Miriam to be there to take part in Moses actually surviving that time in his life. Moses survived that time because Miriam was obedient to God and making sure that Moses survived. She was there even when she didn't have to be. As we sit and we look at the life of Miriam moving forward in time, Miriam was one of those women that you got to remember as Moses left Egypt, when he killed the Egyptian and he left and he was gone for some 40 years, and he comes back to be the man that takes Israel out of bondage. Not only was Aaron by Moses' side, but Miriam was as well. So Miriam went with Moses and she was there supporting him all the way. Miriam, she knew hope and despair. She knew terror and deliverance. She knew slavery and freedom. She suffered the sense of feeling unimportant, yet she also was very prominent in the deliverance of Egypt or the deliverance of Israel coming out of Egypt. After God delivered Israel, it was Miriam who led all of the Hebrew women in worship of the Lord. If you go over into Exodus chapter number 15, you will see where Miriam actually led. The Bible says that she led all of the Israelite women in worship and praising God for their deliverance. So it doesn't matter if you're male or female. It doesn't matter if you're older or younger. I want y'all to realize, Sparkies, listen to me. I want you to realize that God can use you to do great things. Just because you're a woman does not mean that God can't use you. Just because you're young doesn't mean that God can't use you. It doesn't matter where you are in life. God can use you right where you are. If you're faithful to Him, hey, God can use you to do great and mighty things in this world we live in. Right now, we're in a mixed up time in society. We're in a mixed up time in our lives right now. There's a lot of stuff going on that most of you guys probably don't really understand. I know Adriana doesn't understand it, and you probably don't either, but your mom and your dad do. But listen to me, you can still be a servant of God even in this time that we live in. We sit here in this day and age, you can be a wonderful servant of the Lord. You can be a servant leader just like Miriam was. She led the people in a servant's way of living. She had a servant's heart, but yet was used to be a leader of God. So I want you to understand that as important as Moses and Aaron was, Miriam was just as important. There was a time in Miriam's life whenever she had to strive for power. She thought that she could overtake and get some glory of her own. And let me tell you something, God humbled her. God gave her leprosy. God struck her with leprosy, and she had to live the life of a leper for 7 days. And then Moses finally asked God to cleanse her from the leprosy, and God did it because Moses asked him to. And Miriam had to be humbled. Listen to me, Sparks. No matter how great it is, no matter how great the work is God has you doing, always stay humble. Always stay humble in what you're doing and realize it's not you that's doing the work. It's God through you. All right, so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Doesn't matter your age, if you're a boy or a girl, how old. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. Always remember you can be used of God. Always be a servant. Always be willing to have a servant's heart, but lead through your servanthood. So as we wrap up tonight, I want you to understand that Miriam was important. Yes, Miriam was a woman. Miriam was used greatly of the Lord during the time to get Israel out of Egypt, and she was there with her 2 brothers leading the charge the entire way. Listen, Sparkies, you can be used of God. You can do great and mighty things, and it doesn't matter the circumstances. Stay close to God, and God will never steer you wrong. Hey, I love you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Y'all take care.